A big part of my career has been looking at the therapeutic value of the 12 steps because the 12 steps really have harnessed some powerful psychological forces that creates an amazing change in our life. What is that change? Well, the truth is that the 12 steps are engineered to help us achieve emotional sobriety, to achieve true independence of spirit, to achieve autonomy, to learn how to take care of ourselves. These are things that we don't know. Emotional sobriety really helps us learn how to have a healthy relationship, how to have union with the preservation of our integrity, how to cooperate with integrity. Most of us get lost in our relationships. Most of us do a lot of things we don't want to do. We don't really know how to show up in a good way. Emotional sobriety is about learning to have healthy relationships.
It seems like we are always on life's terms, whether we're on the chapter or not. It is continually showing up and giving me a chance to respond.
Life does, but the ability to live it on life's terms, that's an entirely different matter, at least for me. But thank you for your triple hosting, at least tonight, Tom. I appreciate that very much. So good evening to each of you. Tonight, as we said, we're continuing our discussion of living life on life's terms rather than expecting or even demanding that life conform to how we want it to be. As we all know, especially during painful or frightening times in our lives, living life on life's terms can be very, very difficult to do. I've been discussing the role of humility in learning to align ourselves better with reality, with life as it is. For me, the connection between humility and living life on life's terms is that the more humble we can gradually become, the more aligned with reality we will be, and the more realistic our expectations of life will become. Then we become more able to take life as it comes, or as we're saying in this chapter, to live life on life's terms. In other talks I've given on this chapter, I've offered several descriptions of humility in the last few weeks, and I want to add just one more tonight. It's a description that seems like a contradiction in terms, offered by a psychology professor and psychotherapist named Everett Worthington. His research and his therapeutic approach focus on forgiveness and spirituality, rather, in psychotherapy. He co-authored a book titled Heroic Humility. That's the seeming contradiction, right? Heroic Humility, what the science of humility can say to people raised on self-focus. I looked the book up. Unfortunately, it's only available in hardcover at this point, and it's pretty pricey. But in the book, he likens the journey to greater humility to the mythology and narrative of a hero's journey, where the hero feels a calling or an intense desire to undertake a difficult life task or ordeal, then passes through challenges and temptations, then a descent into the abyss, often accompanied by despair and hopelessness, and finally, some form of redemption and the discovery of humility. But rather than using mythology, such as Homer's The Odyssey and so on, he provides real life examples as he goes through those stages of the hero's journey, including people like Mother Teresa and Abraham Lincoln. He believes that heroic humility is inspirational humility, humility that leads us to want to emulate it. I want to say that again because it's a powerful idea. He believes that heroic humility is inspirational humility, a humility that leads us to want to emulate it. He states that people who are humble have three qualities. Number one, and you've heard both Alan and I and Herb and Tom say this in a number of ways, is an accurate sense of self, a sense of knowing our limitations. And he adds, we are teachable if we are humble. The second characteristic is humble people present themselves modestly in the world and in their lives, but in ways that do not put others off through arrogance or through false, insincere modesty or through displaying weakness. So he adds several elements there that we haven't talked about before, but I think they're all good. The third defining characteristics of people who are more humble, he says, is that they are especially oriented toward advancing others, not through groveling weakness, but through power under control, power used to build others up rather than squash them down. Again, a somewhat different take on a definition of the key elements of humility. But the focus on advancing others, helping support or build others up rather than tearing them down, but not through trying to diminish ourselves. And I really like that focus, but rather through channeling our power and our strength, or our higher power, if you will, in ways that benefit both ourselves and others. I bring up this definition because I have a concern that we may have conveyed the message that humility involves passivity. This is not true. It can certainly involve reflection and self-assessment, but humility, as we're talking about it, means taking a proactive approach to life, identifying what we do have influence concerning or regarding, and taking action to address our problems and create the life we want to create. But this is done in a context or with an awareness of our place in the larger order of things, that it's not all about us as an individual. So it's this integration, this balance of owning our strengths and our capabilities and being focused on advancing others and not allowing any of that to be placed in the service of the ego. I'd like for each of you for a moment to do a bit of self-reflection. You've heard us talk about humility before as neither underestimating or overestimating our capabilities and our sense of our own worth and value, or if you will, of our own importance. Neither underestimating nor overestimating that. So I want you each to reflect for a few moments. If you were going to place yourself on that continuum between taking an overly modest view of yourself and your strengths and accomplishments, or on the other end, overestimating your capabilities and tending toward arrogance perhaps, or excessive self-focus, and minimizing imperfections and limitations, where would you put yourself on that continuum if you had to make a general choice? Obviously, we all move depending on the situation we're in and all kinds of factors, the mood we're in, whether we're hungry or not, and so on. We can all be in different places at different times along that continuum, from really diminishing ourselves to grandiosity or arrogance. But have a sense of where you would place yourself in general in your life along that continuum. And keep that idea in mind as we talk for the rest of this discussion. I want to turn now to some direct descriptions of what I and others view as manifestations of arrogance or of humility. What are some of the beliefs, emotional reactions, and behaviors to look for in trying to develop awareness of our humility or lack of it? What are some of the questions to ask ourselves? And within these questions are the behaviors that we need to look at when we're trying to focus on developing our humility to a higher degree. Please keep in mind the importance of self-compassion, of being a friend to yourself, in listening to these questions. Think of them as tools for building awareness, not tools to bludgeon yourself with emotionally. Also bear in mind, as I mentioned, that we're looking for patterns of thinking, acting, and feeling, not just isolated moments. Some of the questions, if we tend to be self-aggrandizing in our lives, do I consistently show concern for both my own needs, the needs of others, and the requirements of reality? All three, right? Or do I demand that only my needs and feelings be considered? Am I defensive and aggressive when someone disagrees with me or criticizes me? Do I frequently blame and find fault with others rather than compassionately examining myself, looking for my part in my problems? Do I experience and display a strong need to be right? You're not beating up on yourselves, right? Because I could raise my hand affirmatively to all of these at times in my life, for sure, and more. Do I frequently use language that is dogmatic, black and white, or either or? Am I envious of others' successes or have a tendency to set unrealistic goals for myself and want to do everything myself? One more, do I frequently demonstrate a lack of empathy or inability to put myself in another's shoes or see an issue from another person's perspective? Those are all attributes that tend to typify us if we grew up in a way and were raised in a way that encouraged us to have a very high degree of self-focus, right? But as I've mentioned, we can go out of balance, be off center in either direction. Excessive self-focus or almost no self-focus, even healthy self-focus in terms of self-care, but extreme focus on other people, including approval seeking from other people. So this is not simple. It's complex, and I want us all to appreciate that. Here are some beliefs, emotional responses, and behaviors that characterize humility from my point of view. A relatively high level of self-acceptance, openness to beliefs and emotions of others, and curiosity about others' viewpoints, a high degree of empathy toward others, and the ability to poke fun at oneself, to laugh at myself and my imperfections without putting myself down as a person. This is what I talked about 2 weeks ago as being self-effacing without being self-erasing, without attacking myself as a person. Also, characteristic of humility, being comfortable admitting my imperfections, my lack of knowledge or ignorance, as well as being comfortable talking about my accomplishments and comfortable receiving compliments, expressing my own point of view and my own feelings while encouraging others to do likewise. Having an attitude of I am not primarily defined by my achievements or by my failures, and that I am worthy of self-respect and self-worth as a person. So those are some of the questions we can ask ourselves to gauge our progress toward the acquisition of this virtue of humility. So far, I've spoken a lot about what humility is. But now I'd like to go into how to develop more humility. So I want to move from the what much more to the how now to get a more practical focus. The most important point I want to emphasize is that it takes regular, consistent behavioral practice to implement change in our lives. That's whether we're trying to change our level of emotional sobriety generally, or our self-esteem, or grow in our spirituality? Regular, consistent behavioral practice. Good intentions are not enough. They're important, but not sufficient in and of themselves to move us toward greater humility. We need to take action, hopefully daily action. Now, why would we want to do this? Exactly. Begin with asking ourselves that question. Why would I want to do that? So that I can begin to connect to my personal motivations, my personal reasons for wanting to become more humble and wanting to learn better how to live life on life's terms. What can it bring to us? And for those of us who would like to have more of what we enjoy and what's fulfilling and what brings value and greater happiness to other people, what desire or motivation within myself can I connect to that's real to me, that's going to help motivate me? Think of all the descriptions I just gave about characteristics of someone who's struggling with excessive self-focus as contrasted with somebody who's developing more humility. Any of those questions can serve as motivators, either to reduce the pain that certain behaviors are causing us, or to increase our level of satisfaction and happiness with new behavior. Yes, it helps to learn information about how to change, and I'm going to talk with you for a few minutes about that. But how won't matter much if we can't connect to a meaningful, motivating force or purpose inside of ourselves that's going to inspire us to expend the energy and time we need to create change. The next thing we need to do in the path toward humility, I believe, is we need to know ourselves. As I mentioned in that reflection I asked you to do a few minutes ago, we need to become more aware of and experience our own patterns of being excessively self-focused or excessively self-diminishing, self-minimizing, or some combination of both. Am I assertive or am I belligerent, for example? Humility involves being aware of and being sensitive to how we are impacting others in the moment, including asking for feedback from other people about what their experience of us is and how we're impacting them. When I encounter humility in another person, I experience space for me as well as space for them. As we become aware of our patterns and attempt to develop more acceptance of the reality without shaming ourselves, we can learn how to admit to them, own them, and just see them as part of how we developed, how we became who we are. We do this first within ourselves through self-examination, but then move to talking about our patterns to other people we feel safe with. For those working with and living in a 12-step orientation, step 4 made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, and step 5 admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs, are excellent awareness builders for fostering humility, especially for people struggling with arrogance or grandiosity. Notice how I say that, struggling with. People can be we can be just as locked into a pattern of excessive self-focus as excessive focus on others. We are often so unable to see our patterns ourselves. Our need to defend ourselves is too great. They're called blind spots for a reason. Other people can include a sponsor, a mentor, a friend, a therapist, anyone who is willing to give us encouragement, honest feedback, and who we feel supported by in our journey. So I can't emphasize too strongly the role that other people can play in beginning to see ourselves more realistically and fostering our journey toward humility. As we become aware of our egocentric patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting, we can practice self-acceptance and the active process of finding internal and behavioral tools to help build our ability, little by little, day by day, to better regulate our self-centered or self-diminishing tendencies. For those with a spiritual orientation, surrendering to God as you understand Him, or to your higher power, practicing thy will, not my will, can be an extremely powerful daily practice for cultivating humility. Prayer, mindfulness meditation, which refers to learning to observe our thoughts, feelings, and other experiences in the present moment without judgment, spending time in nature, and daily rituals such as devoting time to reading spiritual literature on a regular, such as once or twice daily for 5 or 10 minutes basis, can be helpful in the growth of our ability toward humility. Another tool we can use is experimenting with taking contrary action. You've heard us all talk about the importance of that before. This means engaging in actions and using words that are contrary to what our excessive self-focus or our self-minimizing tendencies would have us do. So we learn and practice speaking the words and engaging in actions, the actions you heard me describe a few minutes ago, that are rooted in humility, in reality, and in balanced concern for self and for others. As you've heard me say, it's important to have specific, realistic behavioral goals if you're going to focus on behavioral change. Goals where you know at the end of the day whether you actually did that action or said those words or not. So starting small, seeking 2 or 3 opportunities a day, for example, to practice greater humility, such as listening when we are prone to speak, or declining invitations we feel to do a humble brag in a certain moment, and so on. Each day to find 2 or 3 examples to practice, or a temptation to display false modesty would be another one. I encourage some of my clients to keep a log or a record of their progress, doing a short meditation each morning to remind themselves of their pattern, and to look for a few opportunities each day to try new behavior. Briefly then, jotting down those behaviors that they engaged in at the end of the day. What the situation was, what you did or said that felt like progress for you. Keeping it very brief. In general, I find it more helpful to encourage my clients to focus on progress rather than mistakes, right? To focus on positives rather than continuing with our old pattern. But there can be room for both. The next morning, we start over again. Another action we can take is we can become aware of how our out of balance tendencies by simply becoming self-acceptance enough to describe or narrating our feelings and our thoughts to another person, if we feel safe enough with that person to do so, and if they wish to listen at that moment, without blaming or victimizing either ourselves or any other person. This involves the skill of learning to describe to another person what we're feeling and what we're thinking. The famous psychotherapist Carl Rogers, one of the architects of humanistic psychology, said, "What I am is good enough if I would only be it openly." Now, this doesn't mean that whoever I'm being open with is going to see me as being good enough as I am, right? That may or may not be the case, which is why it's very important, if we're going to be self-disclosing and try to put more into practice, I'm not going to act out my feelings and my thoughts, but I am going to describe that I'm experiencing them. That can be a very powerful mechanism for change. But again, with somebody we trust and feel safe with. The crucial pieces to this process are to talk about ourselves, not the other person, and to simply be descriptive without demands or even expectations of a certain response. An additional tool that can be very helpful is visualization, picturing or imagining ourselves engaging in behaviors that reflect humility with another person, and imagining in detail the emotions and body sensations we might feel. That process of using our imagination activates the same neural pathways as actually engaging in the behavior or the words do. If you're anticipating an encounter with another person at work or in your personal life, and you're concerned about offering an inflated or deflated version of yourself, practice visualizing yourself in the encounter as you would like to be. See and feel it in your mind's eye with as much sensory and emotional detail as you can create. The more realistic you make the imagery and the use of your imagination, the more powerful it would be. I've also found that role playing, both for myself and my clients, role playing aloud or active rehearsal has helped me and many clients of mine strengthen their ability to express themselves more authentically and effectively and with greater humility in a variety of life situations, because all of these practices help reduce anxiety. This can be part of a morning meditation I mentioned as well. I've had so many clients over the years going into an interview situation or anticipating a difficult conversation where it's been incredibly helpful to role play that conversation out loud. And especially if you're with somebody who can give you some feedback about it, it's immensely helpful. Finally, in terms of the tools I want to mention tonight, I spoke a couple of weeks ago about humility being of the earth, or low, or on the ground. Become more aware of your body, being in more conscious contact through your day with your breathing, with your body sensations, with the feeling of, quote, having your feet on the ground, right? We have that expression. Becoming more grounded in our body can have a dramatic effect in helping us progress toward humility. There are many other tools you can use as well, including affirmations, body-oriented, work such as yoga, and also just spending more time in the presence of people you regard as humble, and noticing, paying attention to how they seem to embody that quality and to live it. I encourage you to try anything that might help. But again, I want to emphasize the importance of daily focus and daily practice, not all the time during the day, but especially for a few minutes in the morning and in the evening, and from time to time through the day. I want to share a few other thoughts before I turn it over to Tom. Arrogance or grandiosity can be viewed as selective focusing on some aspects of ourselves. Oh, by the way, and I would also add self-minimizing and self-deflating. Selective focusing on some aspects of ourselves to the exclusion of other parts of who we are. So a person may indeed have exceptional capabilities or attributes in some areas of life, but in identifying with and seeing themselves only in terms of those characteristics, he or she can easily forget their imperfections, for example. This is also what occurs when we are romantically infatuated with another person, selectively focusing on some characteristics of the person we're infatuated with to the exclusion of others. Another point I want to make is that finding the best balance I'm able to find at any given moment between what I need to do, what life or reality is asking me to do, and what I want to do, what I feel like doing, or what I will just enjoy doing. Finding a balance between those two aspects of my experience is another way to approach the question of humility, making sure I include some time devoted to what I need to do and sometimes I know devoted to what I want to do, and knowing what my tendencies are and trying to shift that maybe in the direction that I need to for myself. Allowing an inner dialogue between our needs and our wants can be very helpful. Humility is not about false modesty, and it's not about pretending agreement when we don't agree. It is about listening, but it's also about clearly and firmly speaking up for ourselves while encouraging others to do likewise. I want to mention one more tendency that I've noticed. I referenced it a minute ago, but I want to say it again. A lot of people I know who manifest, from my perspective, a deep sense of humility have a really good sense of humor. They seem at ease with themselves and with others. In a fundamental way, they seem to enjoy who they are most of the time, like and enjoy life and other people, and don't take themselves too seriously. And they use humor to keep perspective on their place in the larger order of things. They're able to poke fun at what they've said or done, but they don't poke fun at who they are as a person. I think this is what Alan has referred to at times when he says we make mistakes, but we are not a mistake. To finish, I want to conclude with a thought about false modesty and humble brags. As we said, humility is not false humility, is not false modesty. And a way to counteract the tendency to have false modesty is, and that's when we attempt to understate or minimize something that we've accomplished, for example, is just take a moment to just accept a compliment if it's offered to us, or very simply and in a matter-of-fact way, acknowledge an accomplishment or something that we did, where we decline the invitation of our ego to use it as a way to build our ego's strength. A simple thanks or thank you very much, I appreciate that, suffices. Then there's the humble brag, something I think we've all done from time to time. I know I have and still do at times. We want to call attention to something we've accomplished or something we are to enhance our social standing, for instance, but we're aware if we do it directly that it'll be obvious and it won't get the desired effect. So it's important to be aware of our tendencies to try to point to see what I've accomplished or see how great I am or see the group I belong to or whatever, and try to just recognize our tendency to do that without judging ourselves as a person and decline the invitation as often as possible. It's a good feeling. So on that note, I want to turn it over to Tom, and thank you very much, all of you, for your kind attention.
Thanks, Roger. Oh, this last Sunday, my my very good friend Vince, and I've said this many times about him. He is the absolute best role model I've ever seen, best example of just genuine humility. And he's been such a gift in my life. He died on Sunday, and I was just telling my wife that the way I put it was, I was just saying I'm having a hard time adjusting to Vince being dead. You know, it's like it seems like one of those guys that I mean, he was so steady, he was so available, he was so helpful, and so much of what you described, Roger, is about him, the advancement of others. I've seen him, you know, he does that. There's not a false humility at all with him. But he just, and I'm not doing this to put myself down. I'm just saying this, and I just to basically say what I've said to him directly before, which is I can't quite get how he does what he does. He is to me, he's an amazing person, and and he is somebody who can accept that compliment, but he's not somebody who's particularly comfortable with that compliment. It's like he would just as soon we because a lot of people want to give him that kind of have wanted to give him a lot of that feedback. He would just assume we give that to him and move on quickly. But anyway, I just wanted to share that out loud. You know, they say, said a long time ago, we die twice. Once when we stop breathing, and the other time is when somebody speaks our name the last time. So, I'm far away from not speaking Vince's name, and I know his ripple effect has gone on and on and on. So anyway, I just needed to say that ahead of time, because as you were describing all of this, Roger, I was thinking how much it just fit my friend Vince. So thanks for helping me a little bit with that grief today. So thank you. Go back to that continuum. Tell me the continuum again.
Well, there's a lot of ways to talk about it, but I did a simple
But the
one,
way you said it earlier.
On the one hand is a tendency to be extremely self-focused,
Yeah.
or arrogant or grandiose. On the
Yeah.
other hand is a tendency to be very self-demeaning or self-minimizing, self-erasing, right?
Right. Yeah, and you were asking kind of just sort of as a forced choice kind of idea that
Yeah, yeah.
if you're
Which
if you're
tendency
gonna
do
put
you
yourself
have?
someplace.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, so help me with this, because I couldn't get past the answer being both.
yeah,
Okay. It's like, I mean, genuinely both. I mean, I'm not like, just like simultaneously. I don't mean I
yeah,
can do both, but I really do. I mean, that fits my way of thinking about things, that the nature of consciousness is multiple and not singular in nature. But it's like, that's one of the things that's really fascinating to me, because there's just a lot of just questions that are still there, just hanging out there when I listen to that, and I genuinely tried to my internal
yeah.
dialogue was, Roger's giving you a forced choice question. That's what you do, is you choose it, and it's like, I refuse to. I just kept going. No, the answer is both. So, um,
I
so
like that. Thanks,
which
Tom.
made
Yeah.
brought me to one little piece that I think I want to add, because I've talked to some people about this stuff recently, and that is the intrapersonal part of living life on life's term, and humility, in the sense that it is about, which you've said this as much as anybody else, is humility being basically being attuned to reality, and that is our level of comfort with uncertainty. It's I've said this here before. Definitely, you know, spending the time I spent on writing the book about fear, I don't even think it's in the book, because I think it's just one of those things I've learned from doing the book. But the fact that human beings, we seem to be really afraid of uncertainty. My joke is, we're afraid of uncertainty, we hate change, and the only thing certain about life is change. Therefore, and I've said that before here too, but it's just, we aren't the only species who basically on this planet who live in fear of the nature of life. So it's a big challenge. But I just want to use two examples of this, and one is somebody I was talking to whose wife had recently died. And she was in a coma for quite a while before she died. So he lost contact with his partner long before she died. And the other one is somebody that I'm working with, or have worked with in the past, with going through a divorce. And what I noticed, I happened to see these two guys a while back on the same day, and what I noticed they had in common is they both were asking a lot of questions in their head. But what, you know, what it was, they were trying to understand something about this other person, the person who had died. I'm not sure where that person was, what they were doing. They were trying to go back and look at the history and kind of read. Was, you know, it was about like, was she letting go? Was she doing, you know, was she this or that? And the other is with the one getting divorced, who's just wanting to know more and more and more. Why is she doing this? What's behind all this? And in both cases, one case, the fellow is never going to have the answer because his wife is dead. The other case is, I don't know if he'll get the answers from his ex-wife or not, but you know, right now he doesn't have them. So all of that to say, where I came down on working with that, and you tell me, Roger, if this takes us off the topic we're on, but I think it's connected, is that what I was saying to him, it's what's natural is for us to have all of those questions, wondering this, and also even multiple choice things where it's like, it could have been this. She might have been thinking this. She might have done this. This could be the deal, like that. And what I said to each of them in a little bit different way was, first of all, living with those questions is part of your challenge, which I think is part of the reality of the humility of just basically, no, we can walk around with a whole bunch of unanswered questions, because I'm pretty sure if we're paying attention to life, we're doing that anyway with a lot of things, a lot of unanswered questions. You know, we don't trust somebody who always has the answer. You know, somebody's always, we all know somebody like that. They always got the exact answer. And it's like, we don't trust them. It's like, but so I'm telling them that. And the other piece I said to them is I said, where I put it there was with them is I said, okay, get ready here. I always try to warn people in session when the therapy's coming. So I go, okay, get ready, because here comes the therapy. And, or what the other one, I said something I said to somebody today was, okay, kind of as a disclaimer, I said, I'm going to sound like a therapist for a minute. As you know, and the disclaimer includes like it will pass quickly. You know, it won't be here very long, but I'm going to have to go visit that place. But what I told these guys is the danger is landing on any of those questions, landing on some answer that you come up with that you have no way of knowing if it's true or not, but you settle on it because a negative certainty is preferable to uncertainty. So you get a story about this, and you say this is what the story is, and I mean, the good news, they're talking it out loud, so we're processing. But people, when you're doing that all by yourself, it's unconscious, it's happening, and pretty much you don't know that ultimately that story becomes the truth for you. You think this is the story in which she was thinking this, or she did this, or she decided that. And you know, and it was interesting to me, not surprising, how in both cases I could really feel the pushback, the resistance to the idea of not doing that, but both understanding what I was talking about. But anyway, so I guess my broader point is, you know, just living with uncertainty takes guts. When you said humility is not passive, I immediately thought, no, humility's, you're busy when you know, because there's a lot to do. It may not show on the outside. It may not, you know, you may not be doing something where other people can see it, but for me, I'm trying to hold on to. I'm trying to be sure I can arrive at and hold on to an accurate, realistic picture of who I am, or not a knowledge of who I am, and that needs to include lots and lots of uncertainty. So, yeah, that might have taken us off in a different direction, but that's what I'm thinking.
No, it's directly relevant to the question of course. Directly relevant to humility is tolerating uncertainty, right? So,
yep. Well, more than tolerating it, it's like, you know, it's Rodney Crowell has a song, And I like the song. I like Rodney's music, and I like the song. But I love the title of the song, and it's just the title of the song is "Life is Messy."
Right.
It's like, and I use that line all the time. It's like because yeah, it's not just it's not because we don't just want to tolerate life. We want to live life. We want to be in it. And those unanswered questions just come with us. They're part of us. I'm not saying we don't ever come up with answers, but it's like, when you say tolerate, I go like, and maybe this is my resistance to right now, but I'm going on like, I want more than tolerance. I want acceptance of this is
Yeah.
this is part of
Yeah.
this is part of me. This is part of the truth. There will be a day when I drop off the face of the earth, and if I'm paying attention, there's going to be a shitload of unanswered questions in my consciousness. The only way that's not going to happen is if somehow I shut down and give up, and I'm no longer trying to live fully.
Yeah. I hear you. So you're saying embrace uncertainty, is another word that you accept it and embrace it. Right. I'm speaking more about the anxiety for most of us associated with
well, but
uncertainty.
think about what we do for a living. It's like, and tell me if you disagree with this, but I think you probably are on the same page with me. It's like, and there's a little humor to this, but it's the truth. It's like, I don't treat crazy, basically I spend my day showing people and explaining to people how they're not crazy. That everybody makes sense. You go like that, and you come in and you think, well, why am I this way or that way? Then we listen carefully enough to where, among other things we can do for people, we can kind of explain it. It's like, you grew up this way, or this thing happened to you. How would you have how would you not have this? And if we can get that place, that's where I always said, acceptance that we make sense is the beginning of self-compassion. And but it's I'm just want to say that, that I think so much of what we're doing is just trying to help people see that life is messy, and all the mess in there, that's you. It's your life. It's like, and it's fine. It's like, it will evolve. It will change. I am the same as I was 30 years ago right now, and I'm completely different than I was 30 years ago. On that continuum, I'm in obviously at least two different places. So all of that's me. So
thanks, Tom. Thank you. We're closing in on 8 o'clock here as well. Thank you very much for that. Tom, did you want to add anything? Tom Potash?
Just that I had a whole bunch of notes from what you were talking about, Roger. I always appreciate how prepared you come, and how far down into the to the details you bring us. But I will go with what Tom said, as the kind of the closing piece is embrace the uncertainty, because it's going to be uncertain anyway, right?
Right. We don't have a choice over that.
Right. I'm here to experience this life as it unfolds.
Yes.
Right.
That's what this is. At least that's what I think this thing is all about. So, I can resist it, or I can, surf the rapids as they come along.
That's great.
But yeah, it is the top of the hour, and thanks again for everyone for being here with us. Can't do without you.
Tom, let me interject for one second. Somebody had asked a note about whether I have a copy of this. Could you post it? Could you let them know a way that they could get the copy? Because most of what I said tonight is in that paper. I noticed the copyright that I put on it at the top is wrong. It's 2014 rather than 2024. But if you could post however somebody could get a hold of
that. The best place is our Facebook group. If you could join that, and Let me also put my email address if you're not on Facebook.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep,
Thank
Roger
you.
will get that to me and I'll post it and try to post the.
Well, I sent it to you a couple of weeks ago. It's that one that I'm talking about.
Oh.
When I was also talking about humility, it's most of what I said tonight is in that
Okay.
part that I did not get to in those talks. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay. So we're getting another 16 pages.
No.
Does someone need to believe in God to successfully overcome addiction? Well, the way I like to think about what the program does, it connects us to who we really are. And what does that mean? Well, there's this incredible force in you and I, this growth force. It's the force that moved us from crawling to walking. You wanted to take those first steps. And when you fell, and you fell a lot of times, you didn't let your failures stop you. You picked yourself up, you learned from it. And how many times did you fail before you walked? You failed as many times as you needed to. You see that force, I call it a biological imperative, a psychological imperative, a spiritual imperative. It's moving you towards wholeness. It's moving you to be what you can be. Just like in the acorn is all the information it needs to become an oak tree. In you is all the information you need to become you. Become a you that can cope with life and to deal with whatever you need to deal with to be okay. And that's what I'll talk about in my new book, The 12 Essential Insights for Emotional Sobriety.